one camp after another with barbed wire around it. With, I don't know who these people were behind it, but the devastation was terrible. For the first time, I really saw the war. I had been in England, and I had seen Coventry, which had been destroyed, and it turned my stomach, and the East End of London, which had been hit by the Germans. And that really affected me no end. But what I saw in Poland was even worse than that. The damage was incredible. And they ultimately took me to a place to stay with the mayor of a town. And he put me up, it was a nice little home, put me in a room that hadn't been used in 5 years. And it was ice cold. This was in February. And all night long, I shivered in that place. I really shivered. But they were nice to me, you know, they took care of me. That was all they could offer. And the mayor came to me in a few days and said, he spoke English, Major, we're out of food. We've given you our food. Could you approach the Russian general and ask him for food? And I said, of course. I went with him to see the Russian general, a big burly guy, sitting behind a huge desk and staring down at us. And in order to get our message out, I would say something in English, and the Polish mayor spoke English and Polish. So we had to get somebody who could speak Polish and Russian. So there was another interpreter there. So I would get up and speak, and then the Polish mayor would speak, and then this other interpreter would get up and speak. And as he approached the Russian general, he would bow, and every time he did that, his rear end hit me and pushed me back a little. Well, I was irritable and no way ready to get along with that. So the third time he did that, I booted him onto the desk of the Russian general, and with that, the Russian general started to laugh, and he said, Amerikansky. And then he took care of us and gave us the food we wanted. I was ultimately flown into Moscow and had lunch with Averil Harriman and his daughter, and they arranged for a news conference. And they had all the newsmen there who were in Russia. And I sent a telegram back to my mother to say I was all right. It seems that while I was in Russia, my sister had intercepted a telegraph to my mother saying that I was missing in action. And she hadn't told my mother. She was afraid my mother would have cracked up. And my telegram came, and they were delighted by that. And I also sent a telegram to General Partridge, the then commander of the 3rd Bond Division, said, save my job, I'm coming back. And we stayed there for 5 days. We went to the opera in our shabby clothes, in our flight suits. And I recall there was the Japanese ambassador at the opera house. And I had to restrain one of the crew who was furious that there was a Japanese man there. He wanted to attack him. We ultimately talked him out of that. And I was flown from, the 3 of us were flown from Moscow to Poltava to, I think it was Kharkov, to Tehran, to Cairo, to Tunisia, to Athens, to Naples, and back home. When I got back home, I became squadron leader of the 418th Squadron. And Red Bowman greeted me. He was the intelligence officer at the field, and he said, Rosie, you're not very smart. He said, we had put you in for a Congressional Medal of Honor, which you would have had posthumously. And here you came back and you spoiled it all. All you're getting is a Distinguished Service Cross. I was happy to get that. And anything posthumously. And the war came to an end. I think I flew one more time after that. I remember when the war did come to an end, we flew into Poland, I think, to pick up French prisoners of war and fly them back to France. And they were huddled in the plane. I decided that I would give them a treat. When we got over near Paris, I said, oh, what the heck. We flew off our course and circled Paris, and I told them, we're over Paris. And with that, they all regurgitated, and the plane smelled badly. It was a bad thing on my part to do. And finally, the war ended, and I received my orders to go home. And it seemed the day I was to go home, I went down to the group headquarters and picked up my orders. And General Partridge had ordered a parade that day because we had nothing to do. The war had ended, and these guys had worked day and night, and now they were going to have a parade to install discipline. So as I was walking up the hill to my quarters, down the hill came my squadron with their shirts billowing out, completely out of step. And I really laughed to myself. And as I went by them, one sergeant turned to me and he said, Rosie, you would leave when things get tough. I went back to my quarters, and I thought then that I would never see anybody in the group again. I didn't know what the future would hold. And I was sad, and I left, went home, and I had been assigned to be the operations officer of a transport command, of the transport command. And I decided that with my background in combat, I could do more good by flying combat against the Japanese until the war ended. So I went to Washington and saw General Anderson. I happen to know the man who piloted him, Frank Laurel. And I asked General Anderson to reassign me, and he did, to MacDill Field to take up B-29 flight. And while I was there, the war ended, and I came home. And when I came home, I went back to work at the same firm that I had been with. And now Franklin Roosevelt Jr. was there, and a couple of other people. And I was not ready, really, to go back to work. I was more tired than I thought. I hadn't taken any time off. I'd flown into my third tour. I didn't realize how fatigued I was. And finally, after being there for 6 months, I heard about an opportunity to go to Nuremberg as a prosecutor. And I went to Washington, and I signed up there to be a prosecutor. And one day we were to meet in Brooklyn at the pier for orientation. And I was sitting next to another lawyer who I didn't know. And in walked this beautiful girl. And I said, wow, who is she? He said, would you like to meet her? And I said, yes.